But now that you made me think that my coffee doesn't taste like coffee, now I'm sad. All right. So we're going to do a quick review, and then we're going to hit the last kind of portions of this. A couple of you sent me a message about the quiz. I didn't post the quiz because I got a bunch of kind of follow-up questions that I had to answer. So I wanted to make sure before I posted the quiz that you guys understood what this kind of stuff was. That way no one kind of freaked out on the quiz. The other thing is, before we go today and we're finished, I'm going to talk about the midterm. So that'll be the final part of today. So the last physical time we met, which was last Thursday, we had started talking about the rule of 8. And then in the asynchronous class, I kind of explained it, right? The rule of 8 is Medicare's rule for how to bill for time units. It says in order to bill for 1 unit, you have to at least see a patient for 8 minutes. A typical unit is 15 minutes. So that means in a given hour, you have about 4 units that are timed billable units. For every time that you hit 15 minutes, if you want to get to the next unit, you have to at least do 8 minutes. So in order to get to 2 units, you have to do a 15 full minute unit plus 8. In order to get to 3, you have to do 2 full 15s plus 8. That's kind of a standard thing with Medicare. So when you see a patient in the hospital, most times, like if you're in the inpatient world, most times the patient in the hospital are going to be scheduled for 30-minute blocks unless they're in something like the neuro setting or an ortho setting where they may have 60-minute blocks. So if they're scheduled for a 30-minute block, what that means is you need to spend at least 23 minutes one-on-one with that patient in order to be able to bill them for those 2 units. That also then gives you, about 7 minutes. Usually I spend about 25 minutes with my patients and 5 minutes for doing my notes. But you theoretically have 7 minutes to do your documentation and your cleanup, because Medicare understands that you can't always get the 100% of the time with the patient. You have to clean up afterwards. You have to get them returned to bed. You may have to get them to fill out their paperwork before they leave, all that kind of stuff. That's where this rule of 8 comes from. It's just so that clinicians know how much do I have to do. This is also translated a lot into compensation. Because a lot of clinics and a lot of hospitals will say that, let's say you clock in at 12:01. You'll get paid for that full half hour or that full 15 minutes from 12 to 12:15 if you clock in at 12:01. But if you clock in at 12:08, you don't get paid for that 15-minute period because you're past that period, that 7-minute kind of grace period. So they've kind of manipulated this rule of 8 into reimbursing us as well, not reimbursing, but paying for us as well. So you kind of have to pay attention to that kind of stuff. A lot of the hospitals I've worked in have no grace period, meaning if you're scheduled to be there at 8, you better be clocked in and ready to go at 8, because if you don't, you ain't getting paid. The one hospital I worked in, if you clocked in at 8:02, you didn't get paid until 8:30. That was the way they worked. They paid you on every half hour. So if you were late clocking in, you were late clocking in. You didn't get paid for it. So that's kind of the idea of the rule of 8. I put this little chart here that kind of goes from 1 to 6 units. I would recommend taking maybe a sticky like this. Once you guys get your badges, taking a sticky like this and just doing up to about 4 units on a sticky and putting it on the back of your badge, because that will help when you go out to a outpatient clinic or even inpatient. Very rarely do we spend more than an hour with a patient. If we spend more than an hour with a patient, most of the time it's because we're spending, high neuro level with that patient, and then we're gonna have to calculate it anyway. But about 4 units or about 60 minutes is most of the time we spend with our patients. So that'll at least give you the ability to go, oh, well, I spent 33 minutes with my patient. I can flip over my little badge and go, oh, so I can bill for 2 units and that's it. One of the key things about the rule of 8 that's kind of important for you guys to think about when you're treating a patient, you need to consciously keep track of when you start working with a patient and when you finish with a patient, because you're eventually going to have to document that. And sometimes for documentation, you may not get to your documentation until 5 o'clock at night, and you may have worked the whole day. And you have to remember when you saw Miss Jean, when you saw Joe, when you saw Sarah, And you have to remember that in your head. So it's a good idea. And I used to do this in the inpatient world where I worked, is I'd keep a little notebook in my pocket and I'd write down all the rooms I'm going to see. And I'd write down the time I went in and the time I went out. Because that way I could keep track for billing purposes, how long I spent with that patient. And that really helped me kind of keep track of it for a while until I got good enough that I could keep it in my head. Because when you're, especially when you're a student or a new grad, you've got so much going on in your head that remembering what time you started working with a patient is probably the last thing on your mind. You're more worried about, oh my God, I'm going to screw this up, and not going to worry necessarily about time in and time out. So we went through all this, and then I talked about time sheets.
Just a quick question, Mr.
Yes.
McKeever. So I know you probably mentioned this like previously, but not like your last recording. But in terms of so like for like outpatient, we would do like you would do like ice or ice and stim. Would you count that as like for time that you've seen the patient, like even if it's unattended?
Well, so that depends. So that when you get those unattended, those are usually untimed units. So you don't have to necessarily time those, but that you're still going to time those for how long you totally spent with the patient, because that's important to track as well.
Yeah.
But you're going to have two different things. You're going to have total time spent with the patient and then one-on-one time spent with the patient. So it's good to kind of track all of that. And I note, I usually, honestly, I'm pretty meticulous about when I do my notes. I'll usually note my unattended time in my notes saying, you know, from 12 to 12:15, patient on hot pack. And then 12:15 to 12:45, they were doing Therex with me. And then 12:45 to 1 o'clock, they were on a cold pack. That kept me kind of organized as to what was my unattended stuff and what was my attended stuff. Does that make sense?
It does. So does the rule of 8 kind of apply to like the total time or just the attended?
Okay, let me bring up, so this one actually has a nice white space on it, so I can use this. So let's say, and again, this is going to come into more play when we get into 5th semester. So this is just kind of going over the basis. So let's say we see a patient named Sarah. We go in to see her at 12 o'clock and we're out at 1 o'clock. So we spent total 60 minutes with the patient. Right, that's the total time we spent with that patient. 10 minutes of it she spent on ice or on hot pack in the beginning, right? And this is just kind of an example that you might get on your boards. 20 minutes she spent doing Therex with you, so exercises. 10, 20, 30, 25 minutes she spent doing gait walking with you. 45, 55, and then at the end you put 5 minutes of unattended East. So maybe 10s or something like that. When you're looking at something like this, so that all adds up to the 60 minutes you spent with her. When you're looking at this, these times have to come out of your timed units. So that total 15 has to come out of your untimed units. Does that make sense? Because you didn't spend one-on-one time with her during that. So really, you only spent 45 minutes one-on-one with her. That's where you're now going to use the rule of 8, because now I got 45 minutes that I can bill for. I know I've got 3 units, right? 3 times 15, 45 minutes. So now I then have to figure out, well, which one, because I've got 2 different activities here, which one am I going to bill 2 units for? Which one am I, and again, this is a little bit more advanced, but you brought the question up, so I kind of want to cover it. And so I'm looking at this. Well, the 25 is greater. Remember, for 2 units, I have to go 15 plus 8, right? So that's 23 minutes. Well, I've got more than 23 here, so I can build 2 units. Oh my God, can I hit the right keys today? 2 units there and 1 unit there. Now, the problem is going to come is if you bill 4 units of time therapy with this patient, because you don't have 4 units of time therapy. Does that make sense? If you're like, oh, well, I'm just going to build 2 Therex and 2 gait. Well, you don't have that. You can't bill that. That actually would be fraudulent, right? But in this case, and again, I've got some other untimed units here, but it's not something we have to do. I can bill 1 unit of hot pack and 1 unit of eSIM. Technically, at this point, for an hour, I've got 5 units. even though there's only 4 units in an hour, but I only have 3 timed units. This is where it gets into more advanced billing, where you can actually become really productive for your clinic. Because now in that hour where I normally only get 4 units, I've gotten 5. Right? Because unattended eStim, it doesn't require any time. All it means is I put it on her. I get paid for putting it on or take it off her. Hot pack, same thing. Putting it on, taking it off. It's just 1 unit for doing it. Now, if I put 2 hot packs on her, I only get 1 unit. It doesn't matter. Like if I put 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end, it's untimed. It doesn't matter. I just get 1. But we have to track the amount of time one-on-one with our patients. And a lot of clinics don't do this. What a lot of clinics will do for this scenario here is they'll say, well, the patient was in for 1 hour, so we're going to bill 4 Therex units. That's what they're going to bill. Because the patient was there for an hour, we might as well get the maximum reimbursement we can get. And insurance companies aren't going to look at the Therex unit, and they don't. So they don't get audited. It's the bad side of things here, right? But technically, if you build 4 Therex units, you didn't do 4 Therex. You did some walking, you did some Therex, you did a hot pack, you did eStim. So it's better in the long run to be ethical and prevent yourself from getting audited in the long run. And I've gone through a couple audits and they're not fun. Like having a Medicare representative sit across from you and breaking down a note that you wrote 6 months ago, and you don't even remember who Bob Dolan is or something like that, it gets really kind of difficult. And they're like, well, what did you do with this patient? Why did you bill this? And hopefully at that point, by the time we get you to the graduation, excuse me, your note-taking skills are good enough that you can say, let me look at my note, and I can look at my note and I can translate what my note says to my billing, and you walk out and you're the hero and they leave you alone. And then they go pick on somebody that doesn't have good note skills.
So correct me if I'm wrong, it's like technically you can still bill like units for like unattended time.
Yeah. So
right?
So unattended, these here, the unattended eStim, and even this hot pack is considered an unattended unit. They're also untimed. So these are technically unattended and untimed, which means that no matter how many hot packs you put on Sarah for the day, you only get 1. Like even if you say you saw her in the morning and then saw her in the afternoon.
Yeah. And
you put a hot pack on her twice, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, for that whole day, you can only bill 1 because it's just 1 unit for the day. Does that make sense? Same thing with eStim. Maybe you put it on her in the morning session, put her on the afternoon session. Doesn't matter. It's still in the same day. It's still only 1 unit. So, in the afternoon session, if this was a hospital, you might lose those 2 units because you already billed for them in the morning. Well, maybe then I'm not going to do the hot pack and not do eStim with her. I may just do 60 minutes of exercise or something. So yeah, those are still, we still can bill for unattended. We haven't gotten to talking, you're taking it a little bit further than we have right now.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm okay with questions about it. Because the more you understand this, the better you are at billing ethically. And I'm all, if you haven't heard anything else about me or listened to me at all, I'm all about doing things ethically and keeping your license, because that's the big thing. If you screw these things up, it can mean a suspension of your license, or if nothing else, it can mean that the board calls you before them. You have to explain why you did it, and you're like, oh, I made a mistake. And that mistake will be listed on your license forever. 10 years down the line, when you're going to a new clinic, that audit is still going to be on your license every time that new clinic pulls your license from the board. So it's better to avoid getting that on there. Like my license, when I broke my neck, it was over the renewal period for my license. So I ended up late renewing. Well, because you late renew, you have to go before the board and explain why you didn't renew on time. So when you pull my license, it shows back in 2013, I have a late renewal. That will stay on my license forever, right? And I've had them like, well, why did you late renew in this month? Well, I had broke my neck. I couldn't drive to the board to renew my license. I couldn't get online. I was in the hospital, right? So it's better to protect yourself. And again, the CYB or CYA is always a better option. Cover yourself and protect yourself so that you're better in the long run. The good news is when you're on clinical affiliations again, and if you encounter this in the clinical world, like I said, put your head down, put your blinders on, and get through that clinical affiliation, because the billing is going to be handled by your CI. So any billing fraudulence will be going through them because they have to sign off on anything you do. So that's on them. That's on their license. So it's not like you're going to get in a ton of trouble for that. Put your head down, charge through it, get through your clinics. But just remember, when you're out in the real world and you are a PTA, anything you do can eventually be tracked back to you. So you want to make sure you're being as ethical as possible. Does that make sense? That's kind of what I want to cover with this. And what I'll do once we get back to hopefully on-ground classes, which I'm hoping maybe next semester we're back to on-ground. That would be really nice. So that you guys, we're more one-on-one and face-to-face a lot more, at least. If nothing else, give me 50% on-ground. That'd be nice. We'll see how we do with the next outbreak, right? When we get back to that and we start having tests on ground, one of the things you're going to have to do when you fill out the paper test for me is you're going to have to do your time in, time out. So how long it took you to take my test, and then calculate that into how many units. So if you started my test at, say, 12 o'clock, and you finished it at 12:30, you could have 2 units. That just helps reinforce this rule of 8 with you guys. I can't really do that on the online because it just doesn't work. I tried and it's not a good system. So I kind of throw that out for the online tests. But once we get back on grounds, from now on, I'm going to be beating into you guys units because, again, the more ethical you are, the longer you're going to be a PTA. And the less burnout you're going to experience, because when you get into a company that maybe forces you to do unethical things, it burns you out and you may have to find a different place to work. I've had it happen where I've had to do it, unfortunately, but don't think this is the be all end all yet. We've got a lot that we've got to cover on what's the timed, what's the not timed, because there's all kinds of codes out there. We'll get to that. But the main thing I want you to get out of this is the rule of 8s, right? So, if you spend 8 minutes with the patient, you get 1 unit. To get to 2 units, you've got to have that 15 plus 8. So you've got to get to that 23 minutes. And that'll give you 2 units. That's what I mainly want you guys to kind of think about right now. And then we'll get to more as we go along. Does that help?
Mr. McKeever?
Yes.
I have a quick question. Just like you were saying about keeping like documentation of our patients, if like whoever comes back to ask us about a certain situation.
Yep.
Is that against like HIPAA in any way? Because I know you're supposed to like.
It's not, as long as you don't have identifiable information. Right? So like say I was seeing you in your room 202. I'm just going to write 202 down. I'm not going to put B Brown. It's up to me to remember that you're in 202. Or I've used abbreviations for where I'll put like BB. And that reminds me of my patient I saw. That's not identifiable. I can't use your social security number. I can't use your last name. I can't use your first name. I technically shouldn't use your diagnoses either. So I shouldn't say like psych patient. That's not exactly the best option either, right? But if you use the room number, that's okay. If you use the initials, it's usually okay. And as long as you either safely store those or destroy them. So what I do is once I did my notes, they went in a shred bin. Because those weren't part of the contemporaneous record for the patient. Those were my personal notes. So I can destroy them. Does that make sense?
But are you supposed to keep them? Because like you said, if like in 6 months.
I mean, there's no rule that says you have to keep those notes.
No. Okay.
Yeah, there's no rule that says you have to. And again, as long as you dispose of them properly, you're okay. The only problem they'll run into is if you're one of those that you're keeping records and, you reach over to your drawer and you're like, hold on, I've got it here at home with me right now. That's taking records out of the clinic, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. Are we okay on that overall? I mean, I know that's a hefty subject. I know it's a little more difficult. All right, cool. Thank you, Riley. Got at least one yes. I got some nods. Excuse me. So the other thing I kind of covered was this timesheet. And yes, I know this is a pain in the butt. Trust me, even Dr. Vreskin knows this timesheet is a pain in the butt. We would much rather not have to do it. Unfortunately, we've got accreditors, and those are the companies that keep you getting your license, and they require these. So we had to create a timesheet. The major mistakes I see on people filling out timesheets, the biggest thing I see when I talk to Dr. Vreskin about this is students not having their CI sign them. So just make sure you get your CIs to sign them. I kind of went through in the asynchronous lecture on how you fill them out, what you need to have on them, but even this lecture has it all kind of broken down, that you have to have your printed name, type name, right? Cohort number, clinic site. What I would suggest doing is when you start your clinic for the first time is you come in and you create a sheet where you've got this, you know, you'll circle whichever week it is, put your name here, my name, right? I can't write with this. What cohort you guys are, right? Clinical site, ATI, and CI's name, Bob is my CI, I don't know. And then you've got that set up that you just print one of these off every week and just do your due diligence, fill it out, send it in to Dr. Reskin. Because we have to, believe it or not, we have to maintain a physical copy of these, which is the most ridiculous thing in the entire world to me. She keeps a technical copy as well, because that way she can send the physical copy over to main campus. And she does. We used to have to keep a physical on our side and a physical on main campus. Now we can keep a digital on our side and a physical on main campus, which she is much happier with. I will give her all the credit. She has digitalized the clinical rotations like crazy, where you guys have to do the minimal amount of paperwork. You just kind of have to do some digital work. But just kind of when you get to your clinics and you're getting ready to go out on them, just come back and review this. This will be available for you just to make sure that you do your clinical timesheets right. Compensation I covered briefly. This was the one I got a couple questions on, and I answered those people that had sent me the specific questions. But my main goal in teaching you this part about compensation and everything like that is, and if you got nothing else out of what I said on that lecture, is don't play the short game, play the long game, right? Taking short money is easy, right? But preparing for your long-term health is much better. I can't tell you how much it can save you if your company pays for something like your full benefits, or the benefits are really fantastic and you have low copays, especially if you have kids. For those of you that do have kids, you know that doctor's office visits and all that add up really quick, and that gets expensive. So if you have good benefits, it can help you out in the long run. You know, when I grew up, my dad was in long haul construction and stuff like that. So we had Teamsters benefits. They were phenomenal back then. I don't know what Teamsters benefits are like now, but they were phenomenal back then. And we had no copays, no co-insurance. We had no deductibles. It was fantastic. Yeah, he took a little bit less pay for that, but there are 6 kids in my family, right? 6 kids going to the doctors. You know, one of us gets the flu, all 6 of us get the flu. It saved a ton of money in the long run. So I kind of talked the way through salary. The big thing that everyone always looks at with salary is, well, how much am I going to make hourly? That's what everyone's worried about. If you're worried about that, don't get into teaching. I'll just say that, because you don't get paid as much as a teacher as you guys will get once you get out in the field. So you better hope you love teaching. But don't just look at this. Honestly, this down here, this continuing education costs are more important to me than salary, because you are going to be required to have 15 hours of continuing education every year. And an average, you know, if you go out and you take an average weekend course, which gives you your 15 hours for the year, it can be up to $3,500 if you're going for a specialized course or something really kind of exotic, like maybe pediatric neuroreflexes or a Graston technique or something like that, you know, and you're required to do that. Now, if your company pays most of it, that's less out of pocket for you. So one of the reasons I like education is because most of the time in education, you get a pretty decent continuing education budget because they require you to keep your skills up. Right? So again, this is just, don't sell yourself short is kind of what I was going on that. Insurance basics. This is where I lost some of you guys that actually watch it. Some of you are still finishing watching it, I saw. Why I covered this? Well, this is because that way when you're working with a patient, you guys understand what either your billing group in the back office is doing or what they're doing at the front desk. And not only that, but it's amazing I've given a couple like online lectures on insurance before, because I actually sold insurance before a long time ago in a land far, far away. When I left IT and was going for school, I started selling insurance. And so I learned how people were getting kind of screwed in insurance, because it's really easy to get taken advantage of in insurance. It really is. I mean, if I asked us, how many of you guys have reviewed your cost of car insurance in the last year? Have any of you? Or you just pay it? Okay, at least one of you has, right? Because believe it or not, if you don't, a lot of insurance companies just keep raising your rates and they never tell you why. Even though you've been with them for 5 years, right? Somebody new comes in, has the same car as you, same age as you, they may get a lower rate just because that's the way insurance companies work. They're out to make money. So it's really important to kind of understand this. So in the long run, you guys don't get kind of caught screwed. So talked about that insurance plan cost. That's how much usually you're going to pay monthly. There are some plans that let you pay yearly. I don't know how you come up with 450 times 12 right off the bat, but if you can, you can. Insurance has gotten a lot better now, and you're going to hear a lot of complaints about the Affordable Care Act. That's just going to come into play. The Affordable Care Act has done this. The Affordable Care Act has done that. What the Affordable Care Act has really done is allowed for two things. It's allowed for people with pre-existing conditions to be protected. That's a huge thing, whether you know it or not. I got a congenital heart defect. Anytime that I had to go in for my congenital heart defect before the Affordable Care Act, I had to pay out of pocket for that, because that was a pre-existing condition. They're like, it's not new, so we're not going to pay for it. You were born with it. That's ridiculous. I didn't choose to have a congenital heart. It's not like I'm a little baby. I'm like, hey, give me a heart problem. No, I didn't do that. I was born with it. But they're not going to take care of it for me? Women, technically, before the Affordable Care Act was passed, they can say that pregnancy is a pre-existing condition for you and not pay for you to have a child. Right? And I don't know how many of you guys have children, but childbirth is expensive. It's not a cheap cost. Having one of those little parasites costs you a lot of money. And yes, children are parasites. If you look at the definition of a parasite is a being that feeds off of and grows off of a host. Children are parasites. Right? I can say that because I don't have any. But insurance costs are going up. There's no way around this. And it's not the Affordable Care Act that's driving up the cost of insurance. That's kind of a straw man talking point. What's causing the insurance companies' prices to go up is insurance companies in general are just charging more, right? If you look right now at the top 5 wealthiest companies in the United States, guess what? Like 3 of them are insurance companies. Why is that? Well, because they keep raising the rates on these insurance. Back when I started, I remembered way back again when dinosaurs roamed the earth in PT, I remembered I paid like $50 a month for my insurance, and it was good insurance. Now I'm paying, I don't know what, it's like $400 a month. It's a totally different world now, because insurance companies say, look, we know you need insurance. So here's the thing is, need drives rate. If they know that you need it, they're going to charge you out the nose for it, unfortunately, right? So you have your insurance plan costs. The UCR is kind of important to understand when you're in the clinic, because patients get really frustrated with this, especially when, has anyone ever gotten their EOBs? You know what EOB is? Explanation of benefits from your insurance carrier, where like you went to the doctor and then they send you saying, oh, well, the doctor charged $300 and we paid $50 and that's what the doctor took, right? But if you went and you didn't have insurance, you'd be paying that $300. Well, that's because of this UCR. This is the agreed upon amount that the insurance carrier will get billed from that doctor's office, right? And it's usually based upon the provider's ability to provide the doctor's office with patients. I remember I worked at 2 separate clinics when I first came here, 2 separate outpatient clinics. And for a Therex unit, at one clinic, they took $25 from culinary. For another clinic, they took $15. Well, why was that? Well, because the one clinic was a preferred provider of culinary insurance, so they were being given a lot more patients, so you can make it up in volume, right? You can take a little bit less at a clinic and make it up in volume. This is where we're really bad, though, at physical therapy. We are really bad at explaining this. Like the front office people, and most of the times it's not their fault. Most of the people that work the front office have no idea what insurance is, right? They're usually just there to take a job, and they're hopefully there to set appointments and take money. They don't understand insurance. We should be really better about educating those people. Because when you go to like I've been to a chiropractor's office where they will sell you on buying a $3,000 pocket or policy with them, and they're really good at selling you this. We can't do that kind of stuff. I don't know what it is about physical. We are not good at marketing. We just suck at marketing in physical therapy, right? Why do so many chiropractor clinics have so many patients? Because they get referrals from their patients. They kind of force their patients to refer people to them, right? Oh, refer your friends. We don't do that. So we miss out on that. So it's kind of strange. The UCR is kind of important to understand, because I've had patients come to me and bring their EOBs and say, well, why did you bill $250, but the insurance company only had to pay $50? And, you know, you can be the kind of person that says, well, talk to the front desk about that. But it makes them feel a little better if you understand how their billing kind of works. And you don't have to understand every insurance. You just go, oh, well, that's our UCR. And if you have questions about that, you can talk to the front desk. But that just is what the insurance pays us, and we kind of have to accept that rate. Because once it's true, if you would join like United Healthcare as a provider, initially they're just going to tell you what they're going to pay you because you're a new provider. They'll say, we are only going to pay you $50 for every visit you have with the patient, and you've got to take it. Otherwise, you don't get United Healthcare patients. Later on, when you start building up your clientele and they're starting to see results from you, then you can negotiate a little bit. But in the beginning, you take what they pay you. Excuse me. Deductible. This was the amount that you must pay out of pocket before your provider pays anything. And these are just keeping going this way. One of the nice things, again, about the Affordable Care Act is it sets a maximum on deductibles. I want to say right now the max on deductibles is $9,000, which is still ridiculous, in my opinion, right? But because you figure this out, if you're paying back here, right, $450 a year for $450 a month for your insurance, and on top of that, you have to pay $4,500 out of pocket, that insurance is ridiculous. It's the same idea for your car. If any of you have gotten a car accident, right? You get in a car accident, you take your car to a repair shop, your insurance has a deductible. And usually it's $500, $1,000, maybe you have a $2,500 deductible. So what that is if the repair shop says, well, your bill is $5,000, you have to pay that deductible and the insurance company pays the rest. And then your insurance rates go up anyway and you're in trouble. But, right, so that's kind of the idea of the deductible. Before the insurance company will pay for anything, you have to pay that out of pocket. Now, the nice thing about that is that is based on UCR. Those usury customary rates, right? And reasonable rates. So you're not going to pay that $300. You're going to pay whatever the insurance company agreed upon. And that can lower your costs a little bit. Where they really get you, though, is when you get here to this family. When you guys just know that when you get to be a family, things get a little hinky, right? So for you, you have to get to $4,500. But before your spouse gets anything reimbursed, you may have to get to $8,500. And that's a pretty big jump. That can bankrupt families, right? And it's funny is we're one of the few, I'm going to call it a first world nation or civilized nations where it's something like stupid, like 22% of our population go bankrupt from medical bills, right? That's kind of scary to me, isn't it? I don't know about you guys, but it's kind of scary to me that we have people that basically are going homeless because of medical bills. And in some states, literally, they can come in and take everything you own if you owe a medical bill or throw you in jail. I was reading a story when I was prepping for this about in Kentucky where they can actually send the sheriff's department out to you, arrest you for not paying your medical bills, and throw you in jail, right? And then hold you in jail until you pay your medical bills. The problem is once you're in jail, you're not working, so how are you going to pay your medical bills, right? It's kind of silly. Out-of-pocket max, this is kind of, it's funny. I'm always happy when I hit my out-of-pocket max This is the max amount you'll have to pay out of your own pocket. It's exactly like it says. Usually it's about 88 to 16,000, depending upon what you are. But this can be a lifesaver when you have a catastrophic surgery. So say you have a heart attack and you need to have open heart surgery. Open heart surgery here in the United States is about somewhere between $160,000 and $400,000, depending upon what you need, right? Ironically enough, if you go to like Mexico or Costa Rica, it's under 15,000, and the care is pretty similar. But this is another topic on. I'm not going to go off on that tangent because I'll go for an hour on that. But out-of-pocket max would mean that once you've hit $8,800 of having to pay for that surgery, the insurance carrier has to pay the rest. And that can save you. I mean, that $8,800 sucks, but $250,000 is a lot worse, right? And I can speak from experience on this because my ex-wife, who's passed away, before we got married, she has health condition where her autoimmune system just is destroying her body. And she had lost her job because she had gotten sick. And then she ended up with really bad pneumonia and ended up in the ICU for 15 days. And then she had to spend in the hospital another 15 days. So she's in for a total of 30 days. She didn't have insurance. When we got that bill was $1.3 million. Yeah, that's my eyes exactly, John. Exactly. Right? I got that bill for $1.3 million and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Now, luckily, they were able to negotiate down and only charge me $230,000, right? And I'm actually still paying on that bill to this day, right? And that's the difference between having it. So if we had even a catastrophic plan of insurance for her, maybe we would have had an out-of-pocket max of $70,000 and we'd only have to pay at least that. But we didn't have that for her at that time. Very quickly after that, she stopped becoming my girlfriend and quickly became my wife by going down to the what do you call it, the clerk's office at the court and getting married so that we could throw her on my insurance. That's beside the point entirely. We didn't totally get married so she could have insurance. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy what can happen to bills that way if you don't know what's going on. So having insurance is important. And again, back to the Affordable Care Act, that gave something like 22 million people that didn't have insurance prior to this insurance. And right now, if that gets repealed for whatever reason, it's an insane amount of people that will literally lose insurance because of pre-existing conditions. And it's just
wouldn't it be like as well too, like if you tested positive for COVID,
yep,
like they could consider that as pre-existing condition as well?
You're exactly correct. Or if you get COVID twice. They could say, well, you already had it. We're not paying for the second one, right? And that's happening more and more. We just had a guy here in town. I don't know if you guys read the article about it, but he got COVID in February. He's back in the ICU now with COVID again. Now, less symptoms than he had back in February, and he's got a bunch of other stuff, but they did a whole write-up on, I think it was Las Vegas Review and Journal on him. But yeah, they theoretically, if we didn't have coverage for previous conditions, they could say, nope, not paying for that, buddy. Pay for it out of pocket. And that's scary. Copayment and coinsurance are the ones that most people worry about because this is how much you're going to pay to your provider when you go see them once you hit your deductible and all that fun stuff. It's usually a flat fee, right? You go to the doctor, you pay your copayment or your coinsurance. And I'm not going to be here one to tell you that copayment's better than coinsurance, coinsurance is better than copayment. That really depends upon your insurance plan. Right? You kind of just have to know your own insurance. And this is where you kind of have to become pretty smart. For a company I worked at before, they were pushing really these things, the new things out there called high deductible health plans. You'll hear about this a lot, HDHPs. So they were saying, well, look, here's the deal. We have this health plan that's got a $10,000 deductible. But if you go to the doctors, you'll only have to pay $100 per visit. What? Right? And they're trying to sell you on these plans to get out of paying as much. It's kind of sad. But copayment and coinsurance kind of go hand in hand. That's how much you're going to pay to the providers. Physical therapy and a few insurance companies has their own copayments. So they're an additional, they're almost considered a specialist, right? Because like I told you, you have the regular doc, specialist, urgent care, and your emergency care. But some of the new clinics have, or new companies have, where they'll pay, like say physical therapy is $35 for a visit. It's a little bit more expensive than a regular visit, a little less than a specialist. We can't get around it. We got to go what they are. Now, they are trying to do something which I'm not happy with in Congress. They want to decouple physical therapy from health insurance, or actually just decouple therapy from health insurance, so that you would have to buy therapy insurance on top of having health insurance, kind of like you have to do with dental. Because originally, back in World War II, when we developed these health plans, dental was covered under your health insurance. And now you have to buy a separate dental plan, right? For those of you that have health care, you know, you've usually got that separate like $3 a month dental plan you have to pay for, right? Well, they want to decouple physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy from the regular health plan. They're going to have to pay. And what's going to happen is people aren't going to take that. If you look at people that take dental insurance, there's a ton of people that just don't take it because it's an extra $3 a month. They just, oh no, I'm okay. I don't need to go to the dentist, right? And they're walking around like in my neighborhood back in Pennsylvania where they got one good tooth. But just be aware that this is why we have the APTA. The APTA kind of protects us from this type of stuff. And I said the coinsurance is kind of like that deductible. It is all about money. You're 100% right. And I'm not, and I'm of the believer that I'm not sure that our healthcare should be all about money. Right? I mean, if you look at any other civilized country that has universal healthcare systems, the big thing I always hear is, well, doctors are going to get paid less. Well, if that's the case, doctors in other countries would stop treating in other countries. Right? I just don't understand that. Doctors still get paid in other countries. They're still well paid. They still have a good lifestyle. When I was in Denmark doing physical therapy, I made good money, right? It wasn't any difference. They had universal health care there. It wasn't anything different. I was actually had more patients in Denmark than I had here in the United States because I was seeing healthy people there. So I don't understand it. So we're going to look at a kind of an example here. So here we have ABC insurance. I don't know if there is an actual ABC insurance. I just chose it. So with ABC insurance, you're paying $500 a month for your insurance. You have a $4,000 deductible, $9,000 out-of-pocket max, and a 15% co-insurance. So what happens? Let's say you start off the year going to PMI Physical Therapy, and they are in network for ABC, right? And at that clinic, ABC says, if you go see a physical therapist at this clinic, we will reimburse $135 to that clinic. Well, great. At the end of your visit, you will typically have to pay about 15% of that co-insurance, or about $20.25, if you've met your deductible. But because you haven't met your deductible yet, you have to pay the full amount. You'll have to pay that whole $135 until you hit that $4,000. And then once you hit the $4,000, then you only have to pay your co-insurance. So it takes a little bit till you get to co-insurance, right? That's why if you watch people that, you know, have health conditions, a lot of times in January, stuff like medical imaging, you know, x-rays, MRI, stuff like that pick up, because those are the most expensive services in our healthcare field. So if they can go get all their x-rays and all their MRIs at the beginning of the year and get all their bills taken care of at the beginning of the year, they'll meet their deductible quick and only have their co-insurance for the rest of the year. Right? The worst time to get this is if you've spent nothing on your health insurance. Like for right now, for me, this is the worst time for me ever. I spent basically nothing on my health insurance all year. And now because I'm having these COVID symptoms, I'm going and using my health insurance, and I have to pay everything out of pocket right now because I haven't hit my deductible. Right? So the breathing test I took yesterday, I'm going to get a nice chunky bill for both of those, and probably hit my out of pocket or my deductible by December, and then it'll reset in January on me. Thanks, docs. That's great. Love you, COVID. But if you look at this, so we've got $4,000 is our deductible, $500 a month. In total, you'll pay about $10,000 minimum just to have your health insurance, right? Because if you go to the doc regularly, stuff like that, most people don't go to the doctors. Why don't we go to the doctors? This is why, right? Even with health insurance here, and this is a good plan. I pulled this plan off. It's not, ABC is not an actual company, but I pulled this plan off the healthcare exchange, right? But if you know that before you really get any care, you've got to pay $10,000, you're likely to not go to the doctor, right? So you may miss, and that's why a lot of plans now have that free health visit once a year or stuff like that, or immunizations are free to at least encourage that. But you know, $10,000, like to you guys right now, your students, $10,000 is a lot of money, isn't it? You know, even if you're wealthy like me, because I'm obviously super duper wealthy living in this wonderful apartment, right? Even if you're wealthy, or even if you're moderately well off, I mean, you figure median income in the United States is about $65,000, right? That's about the median income. I have it down here, right? 60,000 is what it came up to. That means for your healthcare, you're paying about 1/6 of your income. Think about that for a second, though. That's kind of scary to me. Now, there are all kinds of tax things you can maybe get back at the end of the year because of it, right? But that gets pricey. Now, you're making $300,000 a year. Does $10,000 matter to you at that point? Well, maybe if you're like me, and if I was ever making that much, it would matter to me because I'm a penny pincher. But this is why when you talk to people, and I hate to say this, because I've talked to a lot of Congress people about this, senators and representatives, they don't understand why people are upset about this. They don't understand why why people complain about healthcare. Well, that's because if you're in the Senate or in the House of Representatives, you have healthcare 100% paid for life. You don't have any of this. It's paid. On top of that, they're making anywhere from $174,000 to $250,000 a year being a senator. So even if they had to pay this, $10,000 to that amount of salary really is not that big of a deal. Right? Thanks, Riley. Exactly. Ridiculous. I remember I talked to, I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago, we had Dean Heller as one of our senators. I met with him with a bunch of other physical therapists, and we challenged him. We said, why don't you try living on what a normal person lives on for a week and see if you can pull it off? And his comment to us was, well, why would I want to live like a poor person? Right? That's the problem. That's the disconnect. Yeah, they get life insurance for life. They get the salary for life too. Right? That's why everyone wants to be a senator. And most of them, think about it, most of them that are going in to be senators and going in to be representatives are lawyers, doctors, stockbrokers, you know, representatives from Merrill Schwab or something like that. What's funny with, you mentioned AOC, she's a great example of someone coming from working class, but even her, when she became a senator and she got the senator's salary, what she didn't think about was she's keeping her home back in New York and keeping her home and having to have a home in Washington. And I don't know if you guys know about Washington, D.C., but home prices in Washington, D.C. are ridiculous. My friend has, you know, he lives right outside of Washington, D.C. He works for the EPA, and he has a 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom house, and that was $2.7 million. Right? Home prices are ridiculous. So I don't know. We just have to kind of understand this. This is why people are hurting. You know, a lot of you guys, if I asked you, most of you probably before you came to this program weren't making median income. I'd be willing to bet. Now, some of you probably were. You know, before I came into PTA, I was actually making more than median, way more than median income. I made more in IT than I make now, but I just don't want to do that anymore. I'm happier making a little less and being happy with what I do. But even for me, it's a good chunk of my salary from my medical bills. Right? Yeah, exactly. There's an article about her moving when she didn't get paid yet, and that was rough for her. She was staying at one of the other senators' houses for quite a while. But this is the argument we get into, because the next thing you hear to solve this is, you guys have all heard universal insurance, right? Medicare for all. And the argument about that is we're going to pay more in taxes. If we pay more in taxes, you're going to have to pay more in taxes. And that's the boogeyman. You're going to have to pay more in taxes. I look at this and going, you're already paying tax. It's just called health insurance. You know, when I was in Denmark, I don't know how much you guys are familiar with like the Scandinavian style of health insurance and that. But when you're in Denmark, your taxes are about 45% of your income. That seems like a lot, right? But I got free health insurance. I got a universal basic income when I worked there. So I got $1,500 a month from the government as a paycheck every month. right? What happens right now if you guys get a $1,500 check from the government every month? Does that change your lifestyle? Yeah, I see some nods, right? That may pay for most of your stuff. So, yeah, so I pay 45%. And the argument then becomes, yeah, but you're paying for these other people that aren't working. So, good for them. If they don't want to work, why do we worry about what people don't want to do and not worry about what people want to do? Right? This is the argument, again, what we have. There's a lot of arguments say, well, if you give universal basic income, people won't work. That's been disproven in all countries that have universal basic income. They have a higher employment rate than the United States.
I think, don't we have, I think we have one state that does universal basic income, and I think that's Alaska.
Yep. Yeah,
so
for the population. Yep.
Yeah, and it's already we're already doing it in one of the states.
Well, and the other thing is, if you look at Alaska, their unemployment rate is like 3% right now with COVID. Because people, nothing against. Now, are there going to be people that get a universal basic income and don't work? Absolutely. No matter what we do, we are going to have the lowest dregs of society that are going to do nothing, right? That's just the way it is.
We already have that right now.
Right, we have that now. You're exactly right. And this is not a pitch to sway you towards my far left views. Please don't think that. But this is just kind of looking at this. So looking at this, if we do Medicare for all right now, if you looked at and did Medicare for all and looked at a $60,000 a month or $60,000 a year employee, your taxes will go up by 7%. That's a fact. 7% of your income is going to go up, or you're going to lose 7% of your income. But you're not going to be paying for your health insurance anymore. Right? So you'll have to pay taxes an extra $42.70 a year, but you were paying $10,000 before. You really got about a $5,300 raise or $5,500 raise in your income when you think about it, right? And when you look at Medicare, they have some of the best copays, some of the best co-insurances. Medicare is, if you talk to people that have Medicare and you do a survey on them, that is the most liked health insurance out there because it covers stuff. You need to go to the doctor? Go to the doctor. You need to go get surgery? Go get surgery. When you get into the other types of insurances, when you talk about Blue Cross Blue Shield, when you have to jump through hoops to get surgeries, it can be challenging. But it's just one of those things that you look at this and go, why don't we look at this and why, obviously the forefront of this has been Bernie Sanders for years, right? He's been on pushing for this, like as long as I remember, probably since back in the 80s when he first became a senator, when he was still young and still had hair. But we don't do this because we're driven by the for-profit motivator, right? Now let's look at Canada. Canada has universal health insurance. They also have private health insurance, right? You can still buy private health insurance if you want in Canada. You can buy supplemental health insurance if you wanted it. No one does. Why is that? Because the universal health insurance they have is good enough. And the big argument I always hear about that is, well, there are people in Canada coming down to the United States to get surgeries. Did you ever hear anyone say that? Well, yeah, you know what surgeries are coming down to the United States to get? Elective, like breast augmentation, lip surgeries, butt implants. Because the Canada Health Insurance goes, you don't need that. We're not paying for it. Or they'll tell them instead, look, if you want to get that, you're on a 6-month waiting list to get it. Fine, if they want to come down and get it immediately, great, go ahead and get it. Right? But these are the things that kind of help us, that kind of talk to us. Physical therapy with Medicare is, Medicare technically, if you look at Medicare versus the other insurance carriers, it's one of the better reimbursing health insurances for physical therapy. They're a pain in the butt to deal with. I'm not going to lie. Medicare can be just a bear to deal with, right? Because they audit a lot. But again, if we do things ethically, we do things morally, the audits take care of themselves. Right? The only time I've ever heard a company complain about audits are when they're doing something that they are going to get caught doing. Right? That's just, I don't know. Every time I've had a Medicare audit, they've gone fantastic. Like when I've been brought in before the Medicare auditor, oh yeah, I worked with this patient, that patient, this is what I did. Let me see my notes. Oh yeah, okay, I think I had one charge come back on me because I knew exactly what was going on in my notes.
Is that like so are audits like just like if it gets reported, or is that like a monthly?
Well, there's both. It can be a reporting, right? Like say you have a patient that reports to the clinic, they're going to audit them. It can also be a random. Sometimes they will just pull a clinic out at random and say, we're going to go audit that clinic. You know, it could be a board, like the licensure board for PTs could report them to Medicare to audit them as well, right? It can be you guys. And that's the thing is once you become a clinician as a, you know, and you're treating Medicare patients, if you know your clinic is performing fraudulent activities, you are required by law to report them to Medicare. And now here's the nice thing. It's a little secret I'll tell you about that. If they get money back from the clinic, guess what? You get a percentage of that. Now you're probably going to get fired from the clinic, right? And they're not going to want you anymore. And they'll never fire you for that Medicare audit. They'll find some other reason to fire you, because if they fire you for the Medicare audit, you could probably sue them. They'll be like, we don't need you anymore because we're in a right to work state.
Do you ever think that like that kind of goes around like you as well?
Yeah.
Like,
hold on a second. Let me see what Dr. Johnson needs here real quick. Hey, Doc Johnson.
Hey, Keith.
The students say hi. I'm just wrapping up my class. What's up?
Oh, you're in class.
Yeah, math.
You guys, what are you doing Monday?
What am I doing Monday? As far as what do you mean?
Like, I'm thinking we're doing in-person lab.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's fine. I usually have it asynchronous for you.
Okay, sounds good. They had mentioned that you wouldn't be able to. We'll talk about it later. I forgot your class right now.
That's okay. I'll talk to you right before your class. How about that?
Good to see you.
All right. Sorry. He forgot I was teaching. I just hope he was going to say hi to you guys, but he didn't. Where was I going? We're talking about getting, see, this is what happens, Doc J. I'm telling you. But yeah. But he probably didn't realize I was with you guys. He probably thought I was with the other group. So not necessarily that. You guys can pick on him then when you guys get into class with them. But so, you know, like for Medicare, for example, if you report a clinic, and there was a big story about this up in New York State, there was a clinic that the clinician reported to the clinic or reported to Medicare that they're being fraudulent billed. Medicare went in and audited and found they had been overbilled by $2.7 billion over the course of 10 years. That's a ton of money. I'm just saying, right? That clinician got $50,000 for reporting it. And why Medicare does that is because they know that you're going to lose your job, right? They know the clinic's going to fire you. So they're kind of saying, look, here's a little bit to hold you over to find the next job. And honestly, in all the times I've worked in physical therapy, I've never really been without a job for a long period of time. Even when I move, you find stuff pretty quick. There's stuff out there. It's not like it's, you know, now the only people that don't find jobs are people that aren't looking hard enough is all I'm saying. It's what I'm saying. Or have something on the record. But yeah, so, you know, Medicare is rough to deal with, but if you're doing things legit, Medicare is cool. Right there. I mean, most of the representatives I've dealt with from Medicare are usually very reasonable people. And I run a hospital or run a rehab center, rehab clinic. And it's just been, you know, as long as you are honest and ethical with them and when they come in, you treat them like people, things go well. I'm just saying. But if we had this option for healthcare for all, that would take a huge lift off the employers, right? Because one of the biggest expense for employers is healthcare. Right? So now you take that lift off the employers. What does that do to potential either profits? Well, it's going to raise their profits to begin with, right? But it also might raise your hourly rate now because now they don't have to pay for your health insurance. Now, in a perfect world, that'll be what happens. But we know this is the United States, so probably they'll keep part of that and give you a little bit of it, right? But it's still something. I don't know. This isn't, again, not meant as a political statement, not meant as anything like that, but it's just to kind of show that we have a weird view on healthcare in this country. We really do. I can't help but think about this. And when you research it, there's lots of reasons for it. There's all kinds of things, but we pay the most for healthcare and get the least out of our healthcare. We do.
Well, Mr. McKeever, I know you probably have to talk about like the quiz and everything like that, but yep. Does that apply to like HSA as well?
Yeah, so that's where a lot of companies try, or like a lot of insurance companies try to sell you a little bit on their thing, right? HSAs are where you get a health savings account, and you know that can help pay for stuff in the long run. Like for one of the companies I worked for, they would put $100 into my HSA a month, as long as I took this specific health plan they offered, which then helped offset my cost. You know, you have to look at that. Those are the ones you have to. Those are where you really have to look at the balances. The only thing I'll say is when you get to the HSAs and FSAs, so that the health spending accounts and the flex spending accounts, make sure you look at what the rules are on it, because sometimes they'll expire at the end of the year. And if you have money in your FSA, whoever it is takes it. Like I've been at a place where, you know, I had an FSA, and at the end of the year, I had $1,500 in it. I was expecting to roll that over the next year. And they're like, nope, we keep that. You start fresh the next year. Oh, well,
wait, aren't you? You're not able to take that out? Like
no, you're not using. It's a use or lose it for certain ones of those. So that's where you kind of have to pay attention to what you're doing.
Okay.
That's why this is difficult. Health insurance is not easy, right? And again, there's a ton more I could go into with this, because this isn't even gotten into like the nuances of how we bill for health insurance. Really, it's a complicated monster, is the best way to put it. I'm going to bring you guys back to center here. Let me do that real quick. Yeah, back to center. Here you guys are. There we are. So that's kind of looking at, and when I talked about that, that's like the 10,000 foot view, right? When you work in insurance, it gets a lot more difficult. I don't know. I don't have the answer for insurance. I'm not trying to say I have the answer, right? I'm not a politician. God, if I was a politician, I'd have seizures every single day. I'm just saying. But the way I look at it is, if we're going to say that we are the greatest country ever and the best country ever, we've got to find a way to get better than we're doing now with health insurance. I mean, we can't be the best country ever and have 115 million people uninsured, right? Or not seeing the doctor. There's got to be something better for us. I don't know. And I don't have the answer either. It's just one of those foods for thought. So that's it for that lesson. For the quiz, don't totally forget, the quiz is not going to ask you to calculate insurance. That's not what the quiz is going to ask you. Okay. The quiz will ask you maybe about the definitions. Maybe I'll put it, you know, here's co-insurance. Which one of these four is the definition of co-insurance, right? Or this is a deductible. Which one of these four is the definition for deductible? I'm not going to make you, well, John has a deductible, blah, 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 blah. No, I'm not going to do that. That was just so you kind of overview it. You will have a few quiz questions on calculating units. I don't think I can really do any quiz questions. I mean, the only quiz question I could do about your timesheets is, are they supposed to be turned in? Yes or no? Yes, they're supposed to be turned in. There's not a way I can quiz you on those. And same thing with compensation. It's not like I can really quiz you on that. That was more just so that you guys are thinking about it in the long run. So quiz probably be about a 15 question quiz, like most of the quizzes are. You guys are doing really well on it. I will note there are a few of you that haven't done a single one of them yet. Don't like get stuck behind this. At least get some of them done. There's a total of 4, and they are going to lead into your midterm. So your midterm is slated for Monday, I believe, if I remember correctly. Let me grab my schedule here.
Yeah, slated for Monday.
Yep. Okay, that's perfect. So does that mean you have to do this is the question I always get. But Mr. McKeever, Dr. Johnson's going to do on-campus lab. So what about my midterm? That just means I'm giving you Monday to do your midterm. It'll be due on Wednesday. So you can do it Monday, you can do it Tuesday, you can do it Wednesday. As long as it's done before your class starts on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Does that make sense? And I'm going to do my Wednesday the 28th, yes. And I will put that in clear on the midterm that it is due by that date. I am going to make my best attempt to get your midterm up by tomorrow. I do have 2 meetings tomorrow afternoon, so it may not get by tomorrow afternoon, but maybe by tomorrow night I can get it up. That way, if you want to get an early jump on it, go ahead. Your quiz will go up probably once I get done with talking to Dr. Johnson. It'll go up after that. So, and then again, it's 15 questions. It's nothing major. I do the quizzes the way I do them so that you can offset if you don't do so well on the midterm. But even then, honestly, I look back through my midterms. The lowest grade I've gotten on my midterm, I call it math, which is just finishing off math, is a 77. That was the lowest anyone's ever gotten. And that was because he didn't answer 5 questions. The highest grade I've gotten is 100%. So, you know, that's still passing. I'm going to stress this again. I'm going to find some wood because this is not a challenge. No one has failed my math course. Please do not start that. So here's the deal with your midterm. So you have me for 90 minutes. When you have tests from me, I will never give you more questions than your boards would give you. So your boards say that you basically have 1.2 minutes per question. If I extrapolate that out, the max I could give you is 75 questions, but the midterm I think is 65. So it's enough to be different than the quizzes. That's the main thing, is I have to make it chunkier than the quizzes, but not so much that your quizzes are going to unbalance it, if that makes sense. So about 65 questions, I think, is what it was when I did it last time with the group. There are couple questions I have to go back and edit because I did really poorly on the wording. So I edit you'll find, here's the thing, you guys can never take your midterms and share them with next year students because they're never the same. I change them every single year. So I'll go back and go, why did I create that question? Oh, God, it's garbage, and edit it. That's kind of the way any class I have like 5 different versions of every single test. But does that seem fair for your midterms? No, it's not going to be timed. I don't make my tests timed until we get to 4th semester. Now, that being said, one caveat to that. Once you sit down, you have to finish it in one setting. It's not like your quizzes that you can come back and do it again. So when you're ready to go ahead and do your midterm, set some time aside to sit down and do your midterm. But if something happens, I've had some problems where, you know, somebody lost internet. If you lose internet, it'll submit your midterm. Just email me real quick. Or again, I don't know if I told you guys this. Yeah, 65. I don't know if I told you guys this, but if you have, you know, the good old iPhone type stuff, right? If you're on iMessage, or if you have an iPad, or if you have a MacBook, you can always shoot me an iMessage by just using my email address, kmckeever@pmi.edu. That comes to my phone. I have my kmckeever@pmi.edu associated with my Apple ID, so it comes to my phone. If you're Android, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You're green. Just email me. I'll reset your test, and you'll just have to go back in and do it. It happens sometimes. It's life. Or something happens where I've had somebody where they've lost power in the middle of their midterm, and they're freaking out. Oh my God, I only got 10 questions done. I'll just reset it and you just start it again. I'm not a mean person. I'm not going to say, well, you only got 10 questions done. So I kind of like that no one's failed my class. So I'm not going to try that on purpose. I'm just saying. Are there any other questions about that? Does that seem fair? Okay. And then after that, then starting next Wednesday, we'll talk about the midterm briefly next Wednesday, but I'm not going to go over it. You'll be able to go back and review the midterm on your own if you want to. Starting next Wednesday, we're going to get into physics. All right? I know, Riley's freaking out. Don't worry, I spell physics with an F because it's fun.
Mr. McKeever?
Yes, I heard of Mr. McKeever.
So after our math midterm,
yep,
are we completely done with math?
You're pretty much done with math, yes.
Okay.
Now, does that mean that your final might not have 5 or 6 math questions on it? No, it'll have 5 or 6 math questions on it.
Okay.
But it'll be primarily physics based. So maybe math with physics.
Okay. I also had one more question.
Yes.
When we're done with our first semester, so our finals are in January, correct?
Yes. My final is like January, I think 19th or something weird like that. Yes.
Okay. And then do our grades restart every semester, or does it just carry on like?
Yeah, it's just like a normal college. So you'll get graded for this semester. You'll have a fresh semester starting up, and they'll have new grades. And then that semester will end next semester.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, so my final is like the 13th of January. So yeah. And who knows, maybe by then we'll be back on campus. We don't know. That could be cool. Maybe we'll have an awesome vaccine. We'll be back on campus and everyone will be healthy. That'd be nice, but I'm not holding my breath. I'm just saying. Because, you know, I hate to say it, we're kind of...
Was that a pun? Was that a pun for COVID? Not holding your breath?
You caught it, see? Little nuances. All right, guys.